Ella Hart had lived in London long enough to trust the underground the way you trust weather. You didn't have to like it, but you learned its patterns, its moods, the way it could ruin your morning with a straight face. She knew King's Cross St. Pancras in particular, the smell of warm pastry that never quite reached the platforms, the thick churn of travelers dragging wheeled suitcases like reluctant pets, the bright impatience of the departure boards upstairs, and the older, dimmer certainty of the tunnels below. That night, the station felt like a throat after a long day of swallowing people. The late crowd was thinner, the air heavier, the lights a little harsher against tired faces. Ella had worked late at a small publishing office near Bloomsbury, the kind of place that sold seriousness as a product. She was hungry, under-caffeinated, and already rehearsing tomorrow's deadlines in her head when she tapped her card at the gates and followed the familiar flow down toward the Northern Line. The escalators carried her into the underworld with the same indifferent efficiency they always had. She passed the usual posters, bright, too cheerful colors urging her to start a language course or donate to a museum or join a gym she'd never set foot in. She turned left where she always turned left. She walked past the tiled wall with a thin crack like a lightning bolt that she'd noticed months ago and couldn't unsee. Then the signage changed. Not dramatically, not in a way that made her stop outright. It was subtle, almost polite. A temporary-looking sign, clean and modern, mounted at the edge of the corridor where the usual enamel board had been. It pointed toward the Northern Line with an arrow that angled slightly differently than the standard layout. Above the arrow, in crisp black lettering on a white background, it read, NORTHERNL. PLATFORM 10. Ella slowed, her brain reaching for an explanation and finding only fog. Platform 10. She knew the numbers above ground, platforms 1 through 13, the main line rail, the way the announcements always sounded faintly rushed there. But the underground didn't do that, not like this. King's Cross underground platforms had names, lines, directions, northbound, southbound, not numbers like a railway station upstairs. She checked the familiar sign behind it. The old one was still there, slightly higher, pointing the same way it always had, Northern Line, Bank Branch, southbound. This new one was lower, as if it had been added in a hurry. Around it, the corridor looked normal, same off-white tiles, same grime embedded into the grout, yet something about the light felt different, as if a bulb had been replaced with the wrong temperature. Ella told herself it was a refurbishment, a test, a temporary diversion. London was forever being peeled open and stitched shut again. She followed the arrow because it pointed where she was going anyway. The diversion took her past a door she'd never noticed, a plain gray door with a tiny window set high in it, the glass wired with a crisscross pattern. On the door was another sign, smaller, as if someone had printed it in an office upstairs and taped it on. Platform 10, Access. She should have turned back. She could feel that in hindsight as a clean certainty. But in the moment she was tired and hungry, and London had trained her to accept inconvenience with a kind of fatalism. The door stood ajar, not wide, just enough to suggest permission. Beyond it she could hear the far-off familiar thunder of trains. She slipped through. The corridor beyond was narrower, the air warmer. The sound of her footsteps changed, less hollow, more close, as if the walls were tighter around her. She walked for what felt like longer than it should have. She passed another set of posters. They looked newer than the ones outside, and stranger. One advertised a play with a title she didn't recognize, printed in a font too elegant for the underground. Another was a public health message with colors that didn't match Transport for London's style guide. The posters were too perfect, not yet softened by London's daily abrasion. Ahead, the corridor opened into a platform. It was undeniably a platform. It had the yellow safety line, it had the familiar warning striping and the dull shine of worn concrete. It had a bench bolted to the wall. The tunnel yawned black at either end, and somewhere deep in that black she heard the metallic whine of a train approaching. There were only a handful of people waiting, maybe 5. They stood apart in the universal underground stance, shoulders slightly hunched, faces blank, eyes trained on phones or on nothing at all. None of them looked at her, which made it feel more normal than less. London taught you to ignore the improbable. A digital display hung from the ceiling. It flickered, then settled into place with a soft buzz. NORTHERNL train arriving. Ella's heart did a small, confused skip. It was real enough to frighten her. The train arrived with its usual roar and rush of displaced air. The lights in the tunnel flared, then the familiar silver front cut into view. It slowed, squealed, and stopped with the precision London demanded of its machines. The door slid open. Ella stepped inside.
The carriage smelled faintly of disinfectant and damp coats. It looked like any Northern Line train, slightly battered, advertisements above the seats, a map that had been updated so many times it felt like a palimpsest of London's ambitions. She found a pole and gripped it, grounding herself in something solid. The doors closed. The train pulled away. For 2 stops, nothing happened that would have marked the journey as anything other than another late commute. The carriage rocked, the lights flickered, someone coughed, someone else sighed in the deep way of a person who had given up on the day improving. Ella glanced at her phone. No signal, as usual. She watched her reflection ghost across the dark window and tried to convince herself she hadn't imagined the entire detour. Then the train announced the next station. King's Cross St. Pancras, the voice said, bright and bland and impossibly calm. Ella felt the blood drain from her face, not all at once, but in a steady, deliberate pull. Around her, no one reacted. They swayed as if nothing had changed. The doors opened to the same tiled station she had left minutes ago. She stepped out, blinking, and the train slid away behind her like it had never existed at all. Up on the concourse, the crowds and lights and departure boards were exactly as they should be. The only thing that wasn't was the weight in Ella's chest, heavy as a stone. She walked back down toward the Northern Line and looked for the sign. There was no sign. There was only the old enamel board, pointing the way it always had. And the gray door she'd walked through? It was shut now, flush with the wall, and beside it a small plaque read in stern capital letters, "Staff only, no public access." Ella stood there for a long time, staring at the door as if it might blink. Her card had buzzed through the gates. Her journey had happened. She could still feel the cold pole against her palm. But according to the station, Platform 10 was a thing she had dreamed. And yet, when she checked her travel history later, the system insisted she had validated a journey from King's Cross at the time she remembered. It was there in black and white, neat as a receipt. Validated. Real. Impossible. At home, Ella did what she always did when London made her feel small. She boiled the kettle and tried to make sense of it over tea. She lived in a narrow flat in Tufnell Park, 2 rooms stacked on top of each other like a reluctant compromise. The windows rattled whenever a heavy lorry passed. The radiators made knocking sounds like a polite ghost. She sat at her small kitchen table with her laptop open and her phone beside it. The tea went cold before she noticed. Her oyster travel history was simple. Tap in at King's Cross, tap out at Tufnell Park. A normal journey, logged by a system that did not believe in mysteries, only in data. But it also listed something else, something that had no right to be there. A validation at King's Cross at 23:41. She'd already tapped in at 23:37, 4 minutes earlier.
A second tap shouldn't have registered. The gates wouldn't allow it. The system would have rejected it, or at least flagged it as an error. Yet the history didn't show an error. It showed a clean, successful validation, like a polite nod from a machine that rarely nodded at anything. Ella replayed the night in her head. The sign, the door, the corridor, the platform with its wrong posters, the handful of people who had waited as if they belonged there, the train that had looped back to where it started as if it had run in a circle. She told herself she was exhausted, that London had swallowed her attention, that maybe she'd walked into a staff corridor, realized it, turned around, and come back. Memory wasn't perfect. It was a story the brain kept rewriting, smoothing over gaps. But her palms still remembered the cold metal pole. Her ears still remembered the pitch of the train's squeal as it stopped. Her senses insisted this had happened. She tried something else. She searched online for Platform 10 King's Cross Northern Line and got nothing useful. A few forum posts about railway platforms upstairs, a sarcastic tweet from years ago about the station being a labyrinth. Nothing that matched her experience, nothing about a hidden underground platform. She called Transport for London's helpline on impulse, then hung up before anyone could answer. She could already hear how it would sound. Hello? Yes, I walked onto a platform that doesn't exist. Could you please confirm reality for me? In the morning, Ella went back. The sensible part of her wanted to let it fade. London was full of moments that felt strange under tired eyes. But the other part, the part that had made her good at her job, spotting inconsistencies in manuscripts and tiny errors in what people claimed to be true, couldn't let it go. King's Cross in daylight was a different beast. More tourists, more coffee, more urgent footsteps. Ella descended into the underground with the intention of retracing every step. The corridor where she'd seen the sign was unchanged. The old enamel board still pointed the familiar way. No temporary sign, no arrow toward Platform 10. She walked anyway, scanning the walls for marks of tape or screw holes. Nothing. She found the gray door, now firmly shut. The staff-only plaque looked old, edges slightly worn. Beside the door was a small camera dome, its dark eye angled down. Ella stared up at the camera and felt a prickle along her arms. CCTV, that would settle it. Cameras did not dream. Cameras recorded. She found a member of station staff in a high-vis vest near the barriers and tried to keep her voice casual. She asked about refurbishments, about temporary diversions, about whether any platforms had been closed. The man frowned, glanced around as if she was worried she was about to complain loudly. "There's no Platform 10 down here," he said, tone patient in the way people got when they spoke to someone holding a map upside down. "Upstairs, you've got Platform 10 for trains, sure, but underground? No." "I saw a sign," Ella insisted, hating how strange she sounded, "and a corridor. It led to a platform. There were people." The staff member's expression tightened by a millimeter. "You must have gone through a staff door." "It was open." He shrugged. "They shouldn't be. We've got works on, contractors, but there's no platform, not for passengers." Ella swallowed. "Could I speak to a supervisor?" She expected to be brushed off. Instead, the staff member nodded as if relieved to pass her to someone else and pointed her to the station control office. The supervisor who met her was older, with a shaved head and tired eyes that had seen every flavor of commuter madness. His name badge said GPELL. Jeff Pell listened while Ella described the detour in careful detail. He didn't laugh. He didn't immediately dismiss her. That, more than anything, made her uncomfortable. If he'd laughed, she could have decided she was being ridiculous. His seriousness made it feel like a possibility. When she finished, Geff rubbed the bridge of his nose. "We've got service tunnels and emergency access points," he said. "There are areas that look like platforms, maintenance bays, old passageways. People get turned around sometimes." "I'm not turned around," Ella said, and heard the stubbornness in her own voice. Geff looked at her for a long moment. "You said there were posters." "Yes." "Do you remember any?" Ella described the play poster, elegant font, a title that had seemed like a single word. She described the public health one with colors that didn't feel right. Geff's jaw tightened. "That's not TFL stock," he muttered, more to himself than to her. Then he straightened. "All right, if you're serious, I can ask Control to review CCTV, but it's not a customer service thing, it's security." "I'm serious," Ella said. Geff nodded once, as if accepting a burden. "You'll have to wait." She waited on a bench near the control office, listening to the station's constant background hum. People hurried past with the confidence of those who assumed they were going in the right direction. Ella watched them and felt a widening crack in her certainty. She could still picture Platform 10 so clearly, yet the station around her behaved like it had never existed. After 20 minutes, Geff returned. He didn't look triumphant. He didn't look amused. He looked unsettled. "We checked the camera by that door," he said quietly. "At the time you said, just before midnight, you don't go through it." Ella's throat went dry. "That's impossible." Geff held her gaze. "You walk past it, you slow down, you look at it, then you keep going toward the proper Northern Line corridor. You never enter." Ella felt as if the floor had shifted beneath her. "Then how—" "We checked the gates," Geff said, cutting her off gently. "Your car did validate at 23:37, like you said, and then again at 23:41. That's what I saw." Geff's voice lowered further. "But we don't have a second validation point on that corridor, not one that would register like that." Ella stared at him. "So the system says yes, the camera says no." Geff nodded. "And I don't like that." Something cold moved behind Ella's ribs, not fear exactly, but the recognition of a pattern. When machines contradicted each other, someone usually benefited. "Can I see the footage?" Geff hesitated. "I can't show you everything, but I can show you enough." In a small back room lit by monitors, he replayed the clip. Ella watched herself on screen, a woman in a dark coat, hair pinned back, carrying a tote bag with a small tear on the side. She slowed near the grey door. She glanced to her left, toward where the sign had been in her memory. She tilted her head, as if reading. Then she shook it off and walked away. No detour, no staff corridor, no Platform 10. The footage was grainy but clear enough to deny her story. Ella pressed her fingers against her temple as if she could squeeze the correct memory into place. "This isn't right," she whispered. Geff paused the video. "It's not," he agreed, "and because it's not, I have to log it." "Log it?" Ella asked. "Security anomaly," Geff said, "and when I do that, it doesn't stay with me. It goes up the chain." Ella looked at the monitors, at her own image frozen mid-step. Could the footage be edited? Geff's eyes flickered. "Not easily, not without leaving traces. These systems are locked down." "But not impossible," Ella said. Geff exhaled. "Nothing's impossible if someone has access." Ella left the control office with her mind buzzing. Outside, the station carried on as if nothing had happened. She walked through it like a person in a dream, seeing everything too sharply and trusting it too little. By the time she reached the exit, her phone buzzed with a notification. A message from TFL. "We've noticed unusual activity on your account. Please contact customer services." Her ticket had been validated, and someone, somewhere, had noticed. There was a particular humiliation in being told gently by a camera that you hadn't been where you knew you'd been. Ella's days became a loop of self-doubt. She found herself replaying the memory at odd moments, waiting for the kettle to boil, walking to work, staring at a paragraph on her screen and realizing she hadn't read it at all. She would see the clean white sign in her mind and then see the CCTV of herself walking past the door and feel as if two versions of her were living side by side, neither willing to yield. Customer services were polite but useless. They confirmed the account activity. They asked her if she'd lent her oyster to anyone. They suggested she might have double-tapped by mistake. Ella told them she couldn't, not through those gates. They said the system didn't register mistakes the way she imagined. They closed the case as resolved, with the same efficiency London applied to litter. Jeff Pell didn't return her calls. Whether he'd been told not to or simply decided he wanted nothing more to do with the commuter's impossible platform, Ella couldn't know. Either way, the brief sense of partnership she'd felt with him vanished like steam. So Ella did what she always did when official channels failed. She went looking for someone who dealt in contradictions for a living. Her friend Mara Kent, wasn't a friend in the way Ella's mother meant when she asked if she had nice friends in the city. Mara was a contact, a person you kept in your orbit because she was useful and occasionally, unexpectedly, kind. They had met at a book launch years ago. Mara had been the one who'd pointed out, dryly, that the author's true story was full of impossible timelines. Ella had laughed. They'd ended up drinking cheap wine and talking about the kinds of lies people told without realizing they were lies. Mara worked as a forensic linguist. She listened to voices and found the seams. She testified in court sometimes. She had an ear for what people thought they were hiding. Ella met her in a cafe near Russell Square, a place that tried to be Parisian and succeeded only in being expensive. Mara arrived in a long coat, hair tied back, eyes alert in a way that made the room feel less safe. "You look like you've been chased," Mara said, sliding into the seat opposite. Ella told her everything: the sign, the door, the platform, the train looping back to King's Cross, the CCTV that contradicted it, the double validation. Mara listened without interrupting, which was how Ella knew she was taking it seriously. When Ella finished, Mara stirred her coffee slowly, as if considering how to begin. "Memory is suggestible," Mara said at last. "Not just in the way everyone knows, 'Oh, I forgot my keys.' I mean genuinely malleable. You can be made to remember something that didn't happen if the cues are right." "You think I was suggested?" Ella asked, and hated how it sounded, like a conspiracy theorist. "I think it's possible," Mara said calmly. "The question is how. What were the cues? What anchored it?" Ella searched her mind. "The sign," she said. "It was so clear." "What did it look like?" Mara asked. Ella described the font, the clean white background, the arrow. As she spoke, she realized she could picture it with the same clarity she pictured her own front door. Mara's gaze sharpened. "Do you remember hearing anything unusual? Announcements? A sound that made you pay attention?" Ella hesitated. There had been the normal station noise, but now that Mara asked, another thing surfaced, thin and slippery like a fish in dark water. "There was a click," Ella said slowly, "from the speakers, like when an announcement is about to start." "And then?" Mara prompted. Ella closed her eyes. She heard it again in her mind, the click, then a voice. Not the standard TFL voice, something too crisp, too close. She opened her eyes abruptly. "There was an announcement," she said, breath quickening. "I forgot, or I didn't think it mattered. It said something about platform access. It said to follow the signs." Mara's expression didn't change much, but Ella saw something flicker behind her eyes. "That," Mara said softly, "is an anchor." Ella felt cold. "So you think someone played an announcement to make me believe the sign was there?" or to direct you, or both. But the CCTV, Ella began. The CCTV shows you didn't go through the door. That doesn't mean you didn't experience something. It means your body was somewhere else. If your mind experienced platform 10 while your body walked past the door, then you're describing a dissociation event, a brief one, but enough. Ella stared at her. You're saying I hallucinated. I'm saying you might have been pushed, Mara corrected, not by drugs necessarily, by timing, by stress, by sensory cues. There are ways to induce false certainty. Think of magic tricks. Think of stagecraft. Ella swallowed. Why me? Mara leaned back, studying her. That's the important question, she said, because random anomalies are rare. Most anomalies have an audience. Ella felt her stomach tighten. An audience? Mara nodded. Someone wanted you to believe you went somewhere. Someone wanted your travel history to show it. Someone wanted to create a record, maybe to create a witness, maybe to create an alibi, maybe to create noise. Ella remembered the handful of people on the platform, faces she hadn't properly seen because no one looked at anyone on the underground. Those people, she murmured, they were real? Maybe, Mara said, or maybe you remember them because your mind knows what a platform is supposed to contain. Ella's hands trembled slightly as she lifted her cup. So what do I do? Mara's gaze softened, just enough to feel like reassurance. We treat it like any other case, she said. We separate what the machines say from what you felt. We find the part that doesn't fit, and we ask, who benefits? Ella stared out through the cafe window at London's endless movement. People flowed past in coats and scarves, their lives contained in small rectangles of routine. The city looked normal. That was the most terrifying part. If someone can validate my ticket without me tapping it, then they can validate anyone's. Mara's eyes narrowed. Yes, she said, and that means this isn't about you. You're just the first person who noticed. The words settled between them like a verdict. Ella had wanted an explanation that would restore her sense of reality. Instead, Mara had given her something else, a reason to keep pulling at the thread. Because if Platform 10 didn't exist, then something that did exist was pretending to be it. And London, Ella knew, was very good at hiding real things behind believable illusions. They went back to King's Cross 2 nights later, when the station's bones were closer to the surface. Daylight crowded the place with noise. Night made it honest. Mara insisted on the timing, on recreating the conditions as precisely as possible. If something had been staged, it would likely repeat when it was safest, late, when fewer eyes watched, when the right people were tired enough to be moved like pieces. Ella hated how relieved she felt to have someone beside her. Mara walked with the calm focus of a person who had entered a problem and wasn't leaving until it made sense. She didn't look around nervously. She looked around like she was measuring the station, noting angles, noting blind spots, noting which cameras were real and which were decoys. They lingered near the corridor with the gray door. Ella's heart beat too fast. She half expected the white sign to bloom into existence again, as if it had simply been waiting for witnesses. But the wall remained stubbornly ordinary. Mara watched the flow of commuters. "You said you saw a sign here," she murmured, nodding toward the blank tile. "Yes," Ella said. "And you heard a click, then an announcement." "I think so," Ella said, uncertainty pulling at her. "It's like the memory is bruised." Mara's eyes flicked up to the speaker grill in the ceiling. "These announcements don't come from the speaker," she said quietly. "They come from control or from authorized devices tied into the system." Ella frowned. So if you heard something, it either came from control," Mara said, "or someone injected audio into the system." "Injected?" Ella repeated. Mara gave a small, humorless smile. "Like plugging a microphone into a soundboard," she said, "only here the soundboard is the station." Ella's phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. The station lights hummed. Somewhere in the distance, a train screamed through a tunnel like a living thing. They waited. At 23:38, Ella heard the click. It was tiny, easy to miss, a shift in the ambient noise. But once you knew to listen, it cut through everything. Ella's skin prickled. Then a voice spilled from the speakers, too crisp, too close, as if someone stood right beside her whispering into her ear. "Attention passengers, for late-night service, please proceed via Platform 10 access. Follow the temporary signage. Thank you." It was calm, confident, absolutely believable if you weren't listening for what was wrong. The accent was neutral, the pacing professional. Ella's breath hitched. Mara's gaze locked on the ceiling speaker, then flicked around the corridor. Ella turned toward the gray door instinctively, and there it was, a white sign, newly placed, impossibly clean against the stained tiles. It pointed toward the door with an arrow that looked slightly too sharp, too perfect. NORTHERNLI. Platform 10. Ella's mouth went dry. She looked at Mara, wild relief and fear warring in her face. "You see it," she whispered. Mara's expression was tight. "I see it," she confirmed. So it hadn't been a dream. It hadn't been her mind playing tricks. The sign existed, here and now, anchored by the voice in the speakers. A woman in a red scarf stopped, read the sign, and hesitated. Two men with backpacks glanced at it and continued on their usual route. One young man in a suit, too clean for this hour, watched it without moving, as if waiting for something else to happen. Mara touched Ella's elbow. "We don't follow, not yet." But Ella couldn't help it. The pull was physical. The sign pointed. The door sat there, and as if responding to the announcement like a well-trained animal, the gray door clicked. It opened a fraction, just enough. The woman in the red scarf stepped toward it. Ella saw her hand lift, saw her fingers hover. Mara moved fast. She stepped between the woman and the door with a polite smile. "Sorry," she said, voice warm. "Staff only. They've left it open." The woman blinked, annoyed, then shrugged and walked away. The door remained open. Mara leaned in, eyes scanning the edges of the sign. It wasn't taped. It was mounted with magnetic brackets, the kind used for quick changes. She touched it lightly and felt the cold pull of magnet against metal beneath the tile lip, an improvised mounting point. "This is staged," she murmured. Ella stared at the open door. Beyond it, the corridor looked dim and warm. The air that drifted out carried a faint scent, dust and electrical heat. The young man in the suit started walking, not toward the door, past it. But as he passed, he flicked his wrist, and Ella caught the briefest glimpse of something small and black in his hand, a device like a phone, but thicker. Mara saw it too. Her eyes narrowed. The man didn't look at them. He continued toward the main Northern Line corridor, blending into the crowd. But the instant he moved away, the white sign's digital backlight flickered, so briefly Ella might have imagined it, and the door began to swing shut again, slow and deliberate. Ella stepped forward on impulse, as if she could catch it before it closed, but Mara's hand caught her arm, firm. "Not yet," Mara said, again sharper now. The door shut with a soft click that sounded final. The white sign remained. Ella's lungs ached. "That man," she whispered, "he did something." Mara's jaw worked. "Yes," she said, "and he wasn't trying to send you to a platform. He was trying to send someone." Ella's eyes widened. "Who?" Mara looked around, scanning faces, scanning movements. The corridor was full of late-night commuters who wanted nothing more than to disappear into their routines. That was what made it perfect, a crowd of people who didn't watch. "I don't know," Mara admitted, "but now we know the door really opens, and we know the announcement is a trigger." Ella felt her earlier shame burn away, replaced by something more dangerous, anger. Someone had made her doubt her own mind for their convenience. "Can we record it?" Ella asked. Mara's gaze flicked toward the camera domes. "Not openly," she said, "not without drawing attention, but we can do something better." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small recorder, discreet, professional. "We can capture the voice," Mara said, "and voices always belong to someone." Ella stared at the door as if she could see through it. "And platform 10?" she asked. Mara's expression was grim. "Either it's real," she said, "or it's a stage set designed to make people do what they're told." Ella felt the air of the corridor press against her skin again in memory. The two perfect posters, the warm, wrong light. "If it's a stage set," Ella murmured, "then someone built it for a reason." Mara clicked the recorder on. "Then we find out what the reason is," she said. Above them, the station speakers returned to normal, chirping out a cheerful warning to mind the gap, as if nothing strange had happened at all. But the sign still pointed, and Ella knew with a sick certainty that if she waited long enough, the door would open again for someone. They didn't follow the man in the suit immediately. Mara's instincts said patience. Ella's nerves begged for action. In the end, they did what London investigations always required, a compromise shaped by the city's speed. Mara led Ella away from the corridor and into a quieter corner of the station, where the tiled walls absorbed sound instead of throwing it back. They stood near a map board, pretending to study it while Mara replayed the audio she'd recorded. The announcement was clear, too clear. It lacked the thin, distant reverb of a message broadcast down long corridors. It sounded like it had been recorded in a small room. It also had something else, a faint rhythmic pulse behind the words, like a device syncing. Mara listened twice, then looked at Ella. "Did you notice the exact phrase?" she asked. "Platform 10 access," Ella said. Mara nodded. "Not platform 10, not platform 10, platform 10 access," she repeated. "That's scripted language. It's meant to sound official." Ella swallowed. "Can you tell who it is?" "Not yet," Mara said, "but we can tell what it isn't. It's not a standard TFL announcer. It's not the usual voice bank. It's a person imitating the style." Ella's stomach clenched. "So the voice is a disguise?" "Yes," Mara said, "but disguises still leave fingerprints." They returned to the corridor again, careful now, staying back enough to watch without being obvious. The white sign remained for another 5 minutes, then, without fanfare, it was gone. One moment it was there, clean and certain. The next, the wall was blank, as if it had never carried anything at all. No staff member appeared, no obvious contractor. The sign simply vanished. Ella had never wanted so badly to catch someone in the act. They followed the flow up toward the concourse and then down again, letting the crowd hide them. Mara's eyes were sharp, tracking people who moved with purpose rather than fatigue. The man in the suit wasn't obvious anymore, if he'd ever been. Near the barriers, Ella saw him again. He stood alone, head slightly bowed, as if reading his phone. But his phone wasn't a phone. It was thicker, with a small cable looped around his wrist. Beside him, a woman in a long coat tapped her oyster at the barrier. The gate buzzed and opened. She walked through. The man didn't move. Then he lifted his device, and with a motion so subtle it could have been a nervous tick, he waved it near the yellow card reader on the barrier as the next commuter approached. The gate buzzed again. Ella's breath caught. "He's validating," she whispered. Mara's eyes narrowed. A portable validator, or a device spoofing one. Ella felt sick. Her travel history had shown a second validation because someone had made the system believe she'd tapped again. It hadn't been her card at all. It had been this man's device, mimicking a tap and attaching it to her account. "Why?" Ella hissed. Mara didn't answer. She was already moving. She walked toward the man in the suit with the smooth confidence of someone who belonged anywhere. Ella followed, heart pounding. The man looked up as Mara approached. His face was unremarkable in the way that seemed practiced. Mid-30s, neat hair, no distinctive scars or features, the kind of person your eyes slid off. His smile was polite, mild. "Evening," Mara said, as if they were acquaintances. "Evening," he replied, voice calm. His accent was London but careful, like someone who trained it. Mara nodded toward his device. "Interesting kit," she said casually. "You're not station staff." The man's smile didn't change. "Neither are you." Ella could feel the moment tighten, the air thickening around them. People brushed past, oblivious, London's river flowing. Mara's tone remained light. "No," she agreed, "but I'm curious. What's the performance tonight? A little late-night theater for commuters?" The man's eyes flickered, just a flicker, but enough. He didn't know what he meant. Mara held his gaze. "Platform 10 access," she said quietly. Something shifted. The smile dulled. The man's eyes hardened. "You should go home," he said, still calm, but no longer polite. Ella's voice came out sharper than she intended. "You validated my ticket." The man looked at her then, truly looked, and Ella felt a jolt of recognition. He had seen her before, not in the way you see a stranger on a train, but in the way you see a name on a list. "You're making a mistake," he said. "Am I?" Mara asked. The man's hand tightened on the device. "It's not your business," he said, tone flat now. "Go back to your life." Ella took a step forward. "You made me think I'd been on a platform that doesn't exist," she said. "You made me doubt my own mind." The man's gaze remained steady, but something like irritation crept in. "It was a sign," he said. "A door, a message. People follow them. It's what this city trains you to do." "People," Mara echoed. "So I wasn't the target." The man's jaw tightened. Mara's voice dropped. "Who were you trying to send through that door?" she asked. For the first time, the man hesitated. The crowd surged around them. A group of tourists laughed too loudly. An announcement chirped about delays on the Piccadilly line. London covered his silence with noise. Then he smiled again, but this time it was thin. "You're asking dangerous questions," he said, "and you're asking them in a place full of cameras." Mara's eyes flicked up toward the ceiling domes, then back. "Cameras are why you've been careful," she said, "but not careful enough." The man's voice was still even. "Do you want to test that?" Ella saw it then, the smallest movement, his thumb sliding along the side of his device, a button perhaps, a trigger. Mara saw it too. She reached into her pocket and lifted her phone as if to check a text, but Ella realized she was doing something else, angling the camera, capturing his face, the device, the moment. The man's eyes flashed. He stepped forward as if to grab it, and then, like a magician ending a trick, he disappeared. He moved into the flow of commuters, slipping between bodies with impossible ease. 1 second he was in front of them, the next he was swallowed by the crowd, gone up the escalator or down a corridor, leaving only the faint smell of cologne and the cold echo of his words. Ella stood frozen, breathing hard. Mara lowered her phone. "We got enough," she said. "Enough for what?" Ella demanded. "Enough to find him, and enough to know this isn't random." Ella's stomach churned. "Platform 10 access," she murmured. "If it's staged, then what's behind that door?" Mara's eyes were dark. "Something that shouldn't have passengers," she said, "and someone's using the station like a tool to move people into it." Ella pictured the corridor behind the door again, warm air spilling out, posters too perfect, light too clean, a stage set, a trap, or both. She heard the buzz of the barriers, the indifferent acceptance of the machines. Validated, the system had said. Yes, and if the system said yes, then someone could make it say yes to anything. The problem with hidden places in London wasn't that they were hard to find. It was that London offered so many doors you stopped noticing which ones mattered. Mara understood that. She also understood that if someone was staging a platform, they weren't doing it for the thrill of mischief. They were doing it because the city's infrastructure gave them cover. They returned the following night with a plan that felt absurdly simple. Don't chase the man, chase the pattern. If the announcement and sign appeared at a certain time, then that time was part of the mechanism. If the door opened for a handful of minutes and then shut again, then someone was controlling access. They waited near the corridor, but not in it. They watched from an angle where they could see the gray door without standing directly beneath the camera. Mara had brought a small earbud and ran the recorder again. Ella's skin tightened every time station noise shifted, every time a distant click suggested something about to change. At 23:38, the click came. The announcement followed, identical to the one before. Platform 10 access. Follow the temporary signage. The sign appeared. The door clicked and opened, not wide, just enough to invite. And this time someone went through. Not Ella, not Mara. A man in a hoodie, head down, carrying a small duffel bag. He moved as if he knew exactly where he was going. He didn't hesitate, didn't look around. He slipped through the door like he'd done it before. Ella's pulse spiked. "That's him," she whispered. Not the man in the suit, someone else, a courier. Mara's gaze remained fixed. "Wait," she murmured. Seconds later, another person approached, a woman with a suitcase, the wheels clattering. She paused, read the sign, and then, after a moment of indecision, followed the hoodie man through the door. Ella's breath caught. She looked like a normal traveler, the kind who might assume the station had opened a new late-night access route. She didn't look like someone in on a scheme. Mara's expression was grim. "That one's bait," she murmured. Ella's stomach turned. "We have to stop her." "And do what?" Mara asked quietly. "Run into a staff corridor with no idea what's inside? That's what they want. Panic, confusion, a scene." Ella felt trapped by logic. She hated it. The door remained open another minute. No one else went through. Then, slowly, it began to swing shut. The sign remained for a heartbeat longer, and then it vanished again, leaving blank tile and a sealed door like a lie closed tight. Mara moved immediately, brisk but not frantic. She headed toward the nearest station staff point, where a man in a high-vis vest stood half listening to a radio. Mara's voice was firm, professional, with the tone people used when they expected compliance. "There are passengers in a staff-only access corridor. A woman with a suitcase went through. You need to check." The staff member blinked, startled. "What corridor?" Mara pointed. "That door. It opened." The man frowned, glanced at the door as if seeing it for the first time. "It doesn't open," he said automatically. "It did," Mara replied. "I have it on audio and you have it on CCTV. Go look." Something in her certainty made him hesitate. He lifted his radio, muttered something into it, and then began to move toward the door with the reluctant gait of someone walking into paperwork. Mara grabbed Ella's arm and pulled her away. "We don't want to be there when they discover it's not just a commuter mistake," she murmured. They retreated into the station's flow and waited. 5 minutes later, the station changed. It wasn't a dramatic lockdown. London didn't do drama unless it had to. It was so. More staff suddenly visible, radios crackling, 2 men in dark jackets moving with purpose. Ella felt the shift in the way you felt a room fall silent after someone dropped a glass. Then her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Stop." A second later, another message. "You can't help her."
Her throat went dry. Mara leaned in, saw the screen, and her face tightened. "They're watching us," Ella whispered. Mara didn't answer. Her eyes had gone distant, calculating. "If they can message you," she murmured, "they've tied your number to your travel account, which means this is broader than the station." Ella felt suddenly exposed, as if London's eyes had turned toward her personally. A commotion rippled near the corridor. Station staff clustered. A man in a dark jacket spoke sharply. 2 uniformed officers appeared. People slowed, stared, then moved on, already bored by the idea of trouble. Mara's hand tightened on Ella's elbow. "We need to leave," she said. But Ella couldn't, not yet, not while somewhere beyond that door a woman with a suitcase might be realizing she'd stepped into something she didn't understand. Ella pictured the corridor again. Warm air, posters, the feeling of being guided, a place made to feel like a platform. A corridor made for forgetting. As they climbed the escalator out of the station, another message appeared on Ella's phone. "You didn't see her." Ella's stomach dropped. They wanted to rewrite reality, not only for Ella, but for anyone who might have noticed. Above ground, the cold night air hit Ella's face like a slap. The city traffic hissed past. Sirens wailed somewhere far away, a familiar London lullaby. Mara led her toward a side street where the station's cameras wouldn't have such an easy angle. "Listen to me," Mara said quietly, and her voice carried a rare strain. "This isn't a prank. This is an operation." Ella's hands shook. "What did they do to her?" Mara's jaw tightened. "I don't know," she said, "but I know what they're trying to do to you." Ella swallowed, throat tight. "Make me doubt myself again," Mara nodded, "and make you stop asking questions." Ella looked back at the station, its grand brick facade lit like a monument. Tourists would photograph it tomorrow. Commuters would curse it. No one would suspect that beneath it, a door could open into a place that wasn't supposed to exist. A place someone had built to move people through without leaving a trace. Ella's phone buzzed one more time. Last warning. And then, as if to prove their reach, her travel history app refreshed. The second validation at 2341 vanished. The system rewrote itself, neat as erasing pencil marks. Ella stared at the screen, trembling with rage. They weren't just bending perception, they were editing the record.
It was the missing minute that convinced Mara to involve the police. Not the threat messages, not even the vanished travel history. Systems failed all the time, and bureaucracies loved plausible deniability. But the missing minute was different. It was a clean cut in time, the kind of thing that didn't happen by accident. Mara had contacts in the Metropolitan Police, mostly through cases where language mattered more than fingerprints. She called one of them, Detective Sergeant Ali Rahman, and arranged to meet him not at a station, but in a pub near Euston where the walls were thick and the music loud enough to swallow eavesdroppers. Rahman arrived with the tired posture of a man who'd seen too many versions of human stupidity. He listened as Mara laid out the facts without embellishment: the staged announcement, the temporary sign, the door opening and closing, the portable validator device, the threat messages, the altered travel record. Ella watched his face for any sign of disbelief. He didn't scoff, he didn't roll his eyes. He simply looked at Ella when Mara finished and asked, "Why you?" Ella blinked. "I don't know," she admitted. Rahman nodded slowly. "That's what makes me uncomfortable," he said. "Most people who see something strange down there don't push. They forget. They laugh it off. They go home. You didn't." Ella felt heat rise in her chest. "Because I know what I saw." Rahman's gaze was steady. "Or because someone wanted you to know," he said. The thought chilled her. Rahman asked for Ella's phone. She hesitated, then handed it over. He scrolled through the messages, brows drawing together. "This number is masked," he muttered. "Not impossible to trace, but not quick." Mara slid her recorder across the table. "The announcement audio," she said. "It's not the standard voice bank." Rahman listened, head tilted. "Too clean," he murmured. "Sounds like a recording, which means someone has access." "Or someone has a way in," Mara said. Rahman set the recorder down and looked at Ella. "Tell me about the platform," he said. "Not the sign, the feel. What was different?" Ella swallowed and forced herself to remember with precision. "The light," she said. "It was warmer than the rest of the station, like they'd replaced the bulbs. The air was warmer, too, and the posters too new, like they hadn't been there long." Rahman nodded. "Smell?" Ella blinked. She hadn't expected the question, but the answer surfaced instantly. "Electrical heat," she said. "Dust, like when a heater's been off and then you turn it on." Mara's eyes flicked to hers. "That suggests new wiring," she murmured. Rahman leaned back. "If someone built a convincing platform area in a staff corridor, they did it to move something or someone." Ella's voice came out tight. "A woman with a suitcase went through last night. We tried to get staff to check. Then the system, my travel history, changed." Rahman's expression hardened. "So they can tamper with data and they can trigger behavior through signage and announcements." Mara's tone was calm but edged. "And they can message her personally," she said, "which suggests they have access to account details." Rahman exhaled. "All right," he said. "Here's what I can do quickly. I can request CCTV and station logs. I can talk to British Transport Police. I can flag it as a security concern. But if someone inside TfL is involved, this gets messy." Ella's hands clenched around her glass. "What about the man with the device?" she asked. Mara slid her phone across, showing the photo she'd captured, blurred but usable. The man's face, the device in his hand, the barrier in the background. Rahman's gaze sharpened. "That helps," he said. "We can run facial recognition through our system, but if he's careful, he won't be in it." Mara tapped the audio file. "The voice is our better lead," she said. "It has habits, a cadence, a particular way of softening consonants. Whoever recorded it has training." Rahman looked at them both. "You're asking me to believe someone is running a covert operation inside King's Cross, using announcements and signs like puppeteer strings." Mara's gaze was unwavering. "We're asking you to look," she said, "because someone has already altered the record, and once they can do that, everything becomes plausible." Rockman's jaw worked. "All right," he said at last. "We look, but you don't go back in there alone. Understood?" Ella nodded, though her stomach still twisted with the urge to rush back and force the door open. They left the pub separately, as Rockman insisted. London taught people in his line of work to assume they were being watched. That night, Ella lay awake, listening to the city's distant hum, and thought about the missing minute. The portable validator had created a second tap at 23:41. Then the record had been rewritten, erasing it. That meant someone had access not just to the barrier hardware, but to the back end that logged accounts, or at least to a system close enough to nudge it. Ella's mind kept circling back to one detail she hadn't said out loud, the train that had looped back to King's Cross. If that platform wasn't part of the public network, then the train she'd boarded hadn't been a normal service train. It had been something else. Maintenance stock, perhaps, or a carriage moved for a purpose. A theater set on rails. In the early hours, as she drifted toward sleep, Ella's phone buzzed again. No message this time, just a missed call from an unknown number. She stared at the screen, heart pounding, until it went dark again. In the morning, Rockman called. His voice was tight. "You said the door opened at 23:38, he said. "Yes," Ella replied. "It opened," Rockman said, "and it closed, and on CCTV, it never opened." Ella's blood turned to ice. Rockman continued, low and controlled. "But there's a minute missing from the footage, exactly 1 minute. From 23:38 to 23:39, the camera feed drops, then resumes. Clean cut, no glitch warnings logged." Ella felt her breath leave her body. "So someone can edit the cameras?" she whispered. "Yes," Rockman said, "and that means what you walked into wasn't your imagination." Ella shut her eyes, feeling the weight of it. The platform that wasn't there had just become a crime scene, whether anyone admitted it or not. Rockman didn't meet them at King's Cross. He met them 2 streets away, in a narrow alley behind a row of closed shops, where the cameras were fewer and the night air smelled of old frying oil. He looked more tired than the last time Ella had seen him, and more certain. "This is bigger than a fare fraud scheme," he said without preamble. "We've got a missing minute in the CCTV feed, and that's not something a random commuter can do." Mara's expression was hard. "So someone inside," she said. "Or someone with access," Rockman agreed. "Inside doesn't always mean employee. Contractors, third-party vendors, maintenance teams." Ella hugged her coat tighter. "What about the woman with the suitcase?" she asked. Rockman's gaze flickered. "British Transport Police ran missing persons reports for that night," he said. "Nothing matching. But that doesn't mean she's fine. It means no one has reported her missing yet, or she wasn't meant to be missed." The words landed like a punch. Rockman outlined the plan. He'd arranged for a BTP officer to be stationed near the corridor, but not close enough to trigger suspicion. He'd also arranged a maintenance check under the excuse of routine inspection. But the real goal was simple: get eyes behind the door during the window it opened. "The problem," Rockman said, "is if whoever is doing this sees uniformed officers too close, they'll shut it down. We need subtlety." Mara glanced at Ella. "We become commuters," she said. Ella's mouth went dry. "Again?" Rockman studied Ella. "You're the one who can identify the route," he said. "The posters, the smell, the light. If we get behind that door and you recognize it, we document. We don't chase, we don't touch anything we can't justify." Ella nodded, though fear crawled up her spine. She wasn't brave. She was simply too angry to stop. They entered King's Cross just before 23:30, blending into the late crowd. Rahman hung back, watching from a distance. Mara and Ella took up position near the corridor, feigning the distracted posture of commuters checking maps and phones. At 23:38, the click came. The announcement followed, calm and confident. Platform 10 access. Follow temporary signage. The sign appeared as if conjured. The gray door clicked. This time, the door opened wider. Ella felt the pull again. Follow, obey, step into the unknown. And she fought it with sheer stubbornness. Mara touched her elbow. Together, they walked toward the door. Two other people approached at the same time, a man with a backpack and a woman in a long coat. They read the sign, hesitated, then followed. The operation was counting on ordinary people to do the work of normalizing it. Mara and Ella slipped through the door behind them. The corridor beyond was exactly as Ella remembered, narrower, warmer, the air thick with electrical heat. The lights were warm-toned LEDs, newer than the station's usual harsh fluorescence. The walls were painted, not tiled, a muted gray that made the space feel deliberately anonymous. And there were posters. Not TfL adverts, posters that looked like they belonged in a theater foyer. Elegant, carefully curated, not random at all. One bore the words "The Platform" in a font Ella recognized from publishing, Baskerville maybe. Another showed a black and white photograph of King's Cross from decades ago, captioned in poetic prose. Ella's throat tightened. This wasn't just a corridor. It was designed. They walked quickly, trying to look like they belonged. The corridor bent left, then right, then descended a short set of steps. There was no sound of other commuters now. The station noise faded behind them, replaced by a low hum that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Ahead, the corridor opened. Platform 10. It was real, in the way physical space insisted on its own truth. Concrete underfoot, yellow line, a bench, a digital display flickering with arrival information. But now, with Mara beside her and Rahman's warning echoing in her head, Ella saw the seams. The edges were too clean, the paint too fresh. The display unit looked newer than anything else around it. The bench bolts weren't rusted. The platform smelled like recent construction. It was a set built inside an old access area. The man with the backpack stood near the yellow line, peering into the tunnel. The woman in the long coat sat on the bench, frowning at the display as if trying to make sense of it. Ella's heart hammered. "This is it," she whispered to Mara. "This is what I saw." Mara's gaze was sharp, scanning corners. "Look for cameras," she murmured. Ella followed her gaze and saw them, small, discreet cameras mounted high, angled toward the platform. Not TfL's bulky domes. These were smaller, sleeker, private. A train's distant rumble grew louder. The display flickered, train arriving. Ella felt the platform vibrate beneath her shoes. The tunnel lights flared. Then the train arrived. It looked like a Northern Line train at first glance, silver, familiar shape, the comforting lie of normality. But as it rolled in, Ella saw differences. No standard TfL branding, the front window darker, the headlights slightly different. The doors bore a small emblem she didn't recognize, two overlapping circles. The door slid open. Warm air spilled out, carrying a faint chemical scent. The man with the backpack stepped forward immediately, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. He boarded without hesitation. The woman in the long coat hesitated, looking around. Ella saw her eyes catch Mara's, a silent question. Mara didn't answer. She was watching the train, watching the inside. Inside, the carriage was empty. Not like a late night empty with scattered people and tired faces, truly empty. The seats were clean, almost unused. The advertisements above the seats were blank panels. A voice spoke, but not from the station's speakers, from inside the train itself, softer, more intimate. "Proceed," it said. "Please take a seat." Ella's blood ran cold. It wasn't a standard announcement. It sounded like a person speaking into a microphone in the next room. The woman in the long coat backed away. "This isn't right," she whispered, panic rising in her voice. The man with the backpack turned from inside the carriage and looked at her. His expression was not friendly. It was impatient. "Get on," he said sharply. Ella's stomach dropped. He wasn't a commuter. He was part of it. Mara stepped forward, voice calm. "She's not getting on," she said, tone firm, like a teacher stopping a child from running into traffic. The man's eyes snapped to Mara. For a split second, recognition flickered. He hadn't expected resistance. He took a step toward the doors. Ella heard it then, a faint beep behind them, like a timer. Mara grabbed Ella's wrist. "Now," she hissed. They turned and ran back the way they'd come, not sprinting like panicked prey, but moving fast enough to look like they'd simply realized they were in the wrong place. The corridor swallowed them. Behind them, the woman cried out, and Ella didn't look back because if she did, she might stop. They reached the gray door just as it began to swing shut. Rockman was there as if he'd appeared from the wall itself. He shoved the door wider and pushed them through into the public corridor, where station noise slammed into them like safety. The door clicked shut behind them. The white sign vanished, and when Ella turned back, the wall was blank tile and a staff-only plaque again, as if the station had swallowed the secret hole. Ella's legs trembled. "She was still in there," she gasped. "The woman!" Rockman's face was grim. "We can't storm it, not without authorization, not without turning this into a public incident." Mara's eyes were sharp with fury. "Then we get authorization," she said. Rockman nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, "and we do it fast, because now they know you can see the scenes." Ella stared at the blank wall and felt her earlier anger sharpen into something colder. Platform 10 wasn't just a trick. It was a machine built beneath the station, and it was still running. The next 48 hours moved with the strange speed of a crisis, where time felt both frantic and stalled. Rahman filed reports that disappeared into bureaucracy. Mara made calls to contacts who owed her favors. Ella went to work and sat through meetings she barely heard, her mind replaying the train with the blank advertising panels, the soft voice telling people to proceed. At night, she lay awake listening to the faint rumble of the Northern Line beneath her flat and wondered how many secret tracks London had swallowed over the decades. The city layered itself like sediment. Old tunnels became storage. New tunnels burrowed under old ones. History didn't disappear, it got repurposed. Mara spent those nights listening. She took the recorded announcement and ran it through analysis software, stripping away background noise, comparing it to known voice banks, isolating frequencies. She compared the voice to samples she could find online, TfL announcers, corporate training videos, even television presenters. The voice didn't match any known public source, but it matched itself. The man behind the announcement had a particular habit. He held his breath slightly before certain words, as if anticipating the microphone. He softened the T in platform in a way consistent with someone from South London trying to sound neutral. He pronounced access with a faintly elongated A, like someone trained to speak clearly. "It's not a voice actor," Mara said when she met Ella again. They sat in Ella's flat, papers spread across the table like a failed attempt at order. "It's someone who speaks into microphones often, but not professionally." Ella's heart beat hard. "Who then?" Mara leaned back. Someone who works with announcements, she said, or someone who works with public messaging, or someone who trains others. Rahman arrived with tired eyes and a folder thick with printed logs. He looked like a man who had spent 2 days arguing with systems designed to resist urgency. Officially, he said, dropping the folder on the table, there is no Platform 10. There is no authorized passenger access corridor behind that door. There is no log of the door opening at those times. The CCTV missing minute is being treated as a technical fault. Mara's lips tightened. Convenient, she said. Rahman nodded. Unofficially, he continued, there's a disused maintenance bay behind that corridor. It's been used for storage. Contractors come and go. There are access permissions, a lot of them. Ella's stomach twisted. So it could be anyone. Not anyone, Rahman said. Someone with enough access to install new lighting, mount temporary signage, inject audio into the station's speakers, and interfere with CCTV feed for exactly 1 minute. Mara's gaze was sharp. She narrowed it, she said. Rahman opened the folder. We pulled contractor lists for King's Cross Night Works, he said. There's a private firm doing signalling maintenance, another doing lighting upgrades, a third doing communications system checks. Ella leaned in, names blurred together, companies with clean logos and bland mission statements. Rahman tapped one. This firm, he said, they've been contracted to test emergency announcement systems after midnight. They have legal access to the audio network. They also provide portable validators for certain maintenance operations. Ella's blood chilled. Portable validators, she whispered. Rahman nodded. The device you saw, that could be one of theirs, or a stolen one. Mara's eyes narrowed. And the man in the suit, she asked. Rahman slid a printed still across the table, Mara's photo enhanced. The man's face was clearer now, neat, controlled, forgettable. Underneath, Rahman had written a name. Leo Sharp, he said. Not in our system as a criminal, but he works for that firm as a senior communications technician. He's based in London. He's had access to King's Cross Night Works for the last 3 months. Ella's heart beat hard. A name made it real. Mara's voice was low. Sharp, she murmured. Of course. He wants to sound neutral. He wants to sound official. Rahman rubbed his forehead. Here's the problem, he said. Access and suspicion aren't enough. We need proof of wrongdoing. We need to catch him triggering the system or catch the operation moving someone. Ella thought of the woman with the suitcase, the way she'd hesitated, panic rising. We already have someone moved, she said, voice tight. Rahman's eyes softened slightly. We have suspicion, he said. We don't have a report. She hasn't been identified.
Mara leaned forward. Then we create a report, she said. We create a target they can't ignore. Ella's stomach clenched. How? Mara's eyes met hers. We bait the system, she said. Rahman's expression sharpened. No, he said immediately. Absolutely not. I'm not putting you in that corridor again as bait. We don't have to put her in danger, Mara said calmly. We put the operation in danger. We force it to reveal itself. Rahman stared at her, then at Ella. Explain, he said. Mara slid her laptop forward, showing a map of the station's underground infrastructure, a tangle of lines and access points. This platform set, she said, it can't be deep. You described the warmth, the new wiring. That means power is being fed nearby. It also means someone has installed equipment, audio injection, lighting control, maybe a door relay. Ella's eyes widened. So we find the equipment. Mara nodded. "And we find who maintains it," she said, "because that person has to return. Even the best operation requires upkeep." Rachman's jaw tightened. "We can't just roam staff corridors," he said. "No," Mara agreed, "but we can listen." She tapped the audio file again. "The announcement isn't just a trigger for people," she said. "It's a trigger for the door. That means the door relay responds to a signal. If we can identify the signal's frequency—" Rachman interrupted, wary. "You want to hack TFL?" Mara's smile was thin. "I want to catch someone already doing it," she corrected. "There's a difference." Ella felt dizzy with the scope of it. "And if we do," she asked, "what then?" Rachman's gaze was dark. "Then we move," he said, fast, with enough proof that no one upstairs can pretend it's a technical fault. Mara's voice softened. "And we find the woman," she added. Ella nodded, throat tight. "And we shut platform 10 down." Mara's eyes were cold. "Or we make it impossible to run," she said. That night, Ella stood by her kitchen window and watched rain slick the streetlights. Somewhere beneath London, trains slid through tunnels like blood through veins. She wondered how many people had been guided by signs they trusted, voices they obeyed, and how many had gone somewhere they weren't supposed to go. The platform that wasn't there had a voice, and the voice belonged to someone who believed the city would let him get away with it. They didn't bait the system with a person, they baited it with information. Rahman arranged for a quiet internal alert to circulate among station contractors, a notice that portable validators had been flagged for irregular activity, that device IDs would be audited, that access logs for certain night corridors would be reviewed. It was the kind of bureaucratic message that sounded harmless but landed like a threat to anyone operating off-record. Mara insisted on something else, an independent recording device placed near the corridor speaker, hidden in plain sight. Ella volunteered her tote bag, ordinary, unremarkable, with a tear on the side, and Mara slid a tiny recorder into the seam, leaving it propped on a bench near the mapboard like something a tired commuter had forgotten. If the announcement played again, they would have a cleaner capture, with room acoustics. They returned to King's Cross at 23:20, 3 nights after they'd run from the platform. The station felt the same, but Ella didn't. Her senses were sharpened by fear and anger. She watched everyone's hands now. She watched where eyes flicked. She noted who moved with purpose. Rahman stayed at a distance, dressed like a commuter, but carrying himself like a man who could become police at a moment's notice. Mara and Ella waited near the corridor, careful to look bored. At 23:36, a man in a suit appeared. Leo Sharp. Ella recognized him instantly from the photo, but in person he looked even more forgettable, as if he'd chosen his face from a catalogue of blandness. He stood near the barriers, pretending to scroll, his portable device looped around his wrist. He looked up once, and his gaze met Ella's. Not with surprise, with recognition. Ella felt her stomach drop. He knew her too. Mara's voice was barely audible. "He's expecting us," she murmured. Ella's fingers tightened around her phone. "Then he'll make a mistake," she whispered back. At 23:38, the click came, but the announcement was different. "Attention passengers," the voice said. "For late-night service, please proceed via Platform 10 access. This route is for authorized travel only. Thank you." Ella's blood ran cold. Authorized travel only. That phrase wasn't for commuters. It was a warning to her. The sign appeared. The door clicked and opened wider than before. Leo Sharp walked toward it without hesitation. 2 men fell in behind him, moving like shadows. One carried a small duffel bag, the other carried nothing visible, which was worse.
Rahman moved subtly, angling closer. Mara's hand touched Ella's wrist. "Don't move," she murmured. Leo reached the door and paused. He turned, scanning the corridor. His eyes landed on Ella again. He smiled, polite and mild. Then he stepped through the door. The door stayed open, and then, like a trap baited and sprung, a woman with a suitcase appeared, different from the first one, but similar in the way that mattered. She was in her 30s, hair damp from rain, wearing a coat too thin for the cold. She looked lost in the station's endless corridors, the way travelers did when they'd been pushed out of their routines. She read the sign. She hesitated. She looked around, searching for someone to tell her what to do. Ella's heart hammered. "That's her," she whispered, though she didn't know how she knew. She just did. This was the kind of operation it fed on, ordinary, uncertain, trusting the infrastructure. The woman stepped toward the door. Mara's jaw tightened. She started forward. Rahman moved faster. In a heartbeat he was there, slipping between the woman and the door with a smile that made him look like a helpful stranger.
"Sorry," he said warmly, voice pitched to sound casual. "That corridor's closed. Northern line is this way." The woman blinked, relief flooding her face. "Oh, thank you," she said, and started to turn. Then Leo Sharp's voice cut through the corridor. "Officer," he said softly from inside the door, and the word was sharp as a blade. "Are you certain you want to interfere?" Rahman froze for half a second. His cover had been pierced. Mara swore under her breath. The woman with the suitcase looked between them, confused, fear rising. "What's going on?" Rahman's voice remained calm. "Nothing," he said quickly, "just a staff corridor." The voice inside the door spoke again, not Leo's, but the same crisp announcement voice, now intimate and close. "Proceed," it said. "Please take a seat." Ella's blood iced. That voice wasn't just on the speakers. It was on the platform. It was in the corridor now, as if the walls themselves were speaking. Leo Sharp stepped back into view, just inside the doorway. His smile was gone. He looked at Ella and Mara with something like annoyance. "You should have left," he said quietly. Mara's voice was steady. "Where is she?" she demanded, nodding toward the corridor. Leo's gaze flicked to the woman with the suitcase, then back. "Not your concern," he said. Rahman's tone hardened. "It is now," he said, and in that moment the commuter disguise dropped away. Authority stepped in. Leo's eyes narrowed. "You don't have jurisdiction here," he said lightly, as if offering a technical correction. Rahman stepped forward. "Move aside," he said. He didn't. Instead, he lifted his portable device and pressed something with his thumb. The station lights flickered. Not a full blackout, just a pulse, like the blink of an eye. In that blink, the world shifted. The grey door slammed shut with sudden force, catching the edge of Rahman's coat. Rahman yanked back, ripping fabric. The sign vanished as if yanked away by invisible hands, and the wall became tile again, blank and solid. The woman with the suitcase let out a small, startled cry. People in the corridor paused, frowned, then continued walking, already deciding it wasn't their problem. Leo Sharp was gone. He had stepped back into the corridor in the blink and vanished into the staff passage before the door shut. Mara's breathing was fast. Ella's hands shook. Rahman stared at the blank wall, jaw clenched. He pulled his radio from his pocket and spoke into it, voice low and urgent. Ella caught fragments. "King's Cross, corridor, now, door shut, suspects inside." Mara grabbed Ella's arm. "Did you see that?" she whispered.
Ella's throat was tight. He can control the door. He can control the sign. He can blink the station. Mara's eyes were dark. He just turned the infrastructure into a weapon, she said. Rahman's radio crackled. A response came, sharp and tense. Ella couldn't make out the words, but she saw Rahman's face harden. He turned to them. "They're locking down the area," he said. "BTP are coming. We're going in." Ella's heart lurched. "How?" she asked, staring at the blank wall. Rahman's gaze was grim. "Not through the door," he said. "Through the tunnels." Mara's eyes widened slightly. "You have access?" Rahman nodded once. "I called in favors," he said. Ella's stomach dropped as she realized what he meant. There were other ways into the station beneath the station. Old maintenance routes, emergency stairs, places commuters never saw, places Leo Sharp believed belonged only to him. As they moved quickly through the station, escorted by a uniformed officer who met them at a staff gate, Ella felt the full weight of the city's hidden layers. Platform 10 wasn't just a location, it was a corridor of control, and tonight they were going to tear it open. They entered through a staff stairwell that smelled of damp paint and old metal. The uniformed officer led them down narrow steps, past locked doors and warning signs that made Ella's skin tighten. The air grew warmer as they descended, and the sound of the station above faded into a dull rumble. London's heartbeat became distant. Rahman moved with purpose now, no longer trying to look like anything other than what he was. Mara stayed close. Ella forced herself not to panic, focusing instead on details, the way the paint on the wall looked newly scuffed, the way the floor had been cleaned recently, as if to remove footprints. They reached a locked gate. The officer swiped a card. The gate buzzed and opened. Beyond it, the corridor was the one Ella remembered. Warm lights, fresh paint, the wrong posters. Mara's lips tightened. "They curated this," she murmured. "They designed the environment to feel credible." Ella nodded, stomach twisting. The posters were still there, theatre fonts, poetic captions, images of King's Cross in sepia tones. They weren't just decoration, they were persuasion. They told a story. This is a place you're meant to be. Rahman moved quickly, scanning for anything out of place. "Look for equipment," he murmured to Mara. "Junction boxes, wiring." They followed the corridor's bends and descended the short steps to the platform. Platform 10 waited like a stage after the audience had left, silent, lit, expectant. The train wasn't there now, the tunnel mouth yawned dark, but the platform was not empty. At the far end, near a service hatch, a woman sat on the concrete floor, arms wrapped around herself, suitcase tipped on its side. She looked up as they approached, eyes wide, face pale with shock. Ella's breath caught. "Are you okay?" she blurted. The woman's voice came out hoarse. "They told me it was a shortcut," she whispered. "They told me it was for authorized travel." Rahman crouched beside her, tone steady. "I'm police," he said. "You're safe. What's your name?" The woman swallowed. "Sophia," she said. "Sophia Ind." Mara's gaze flicked sharply to Ella. Western European, travelling, easy to move through London without immediate local connections, a perfect target. Rahman asked gently, "Did they take you anywhere else?" Sophia shook her head, tears glistening. "They brought a train," she whispered. "They told me to get on. I didn't want to. Then the lights flickered and they left. They locked the door." Ella felt a surge of fury. They had used the city's authority to corral her like an animal. Rahman stood, eyes scanning the platform. "Where are they now?" he murmured. The uniformed officer spoke into his radio, voice urgent. "We have a civilian," he said, "need medical up here. Also, this place is not in any official map." Mara moved toward the digital display, studying it. Up close, the display's casing bore a manufacturer label, private, not TFL. The cables ran along the wall into a junction box that looked newly installed. She knelt, examining the box. "This is where the audio is injected and the door relay." Rahman joined her, eyes sharp. "Can we pull logs?" he asked. Mara shook her head. "Not without tools," she said, "but we can photograph, we can document." Ella wandered a few steps, drawn to the bench. Beneath it she saw something that made her stomach drop, a small pile of discarded Oyster cards, like dead leaves. Not one or two, dozens, some snapped, some intact. People had been here before. They had been brought through, validated, moved, and then stripped of the only record they carried, their cards. Ella's throat tightened. "Rahman," she called, voice shaking. Rahman turned. Ella pointed. His face hardened. He walked over, crouched, and picked up one of the cards carefully, as if it might burn. "They're collecting them," he murmured.
"For what?" Ella whispered. Mara answered without looking up. "To detach travel histories," she said. "If they validate a card through a portable device and then take the card, they can move the record around. They can make it look like someone traveled when they didn't, or didn't travel when they did." Rahman's jaw tightened. "They can build alibis," he said. "And they can build disappearances," Mara added. A faint sound echoed from the tunnel, metal scraping. Not a train, something else. Rahman's head snapped up. "Move," he said sharply. He ushered Sophia toward the corridor. The uniformed officer followed, keeping his body between them and the tunnel mouth. Mara grabbed Ella's wrist. "Don't freeze," she murmured. They hurried back into the corridor, the warm lights suddenly feeling oppressive. As they moved, Ella heard something behind them. Footsteps, quick, controlled. Someone was running through the service passage, parallel to the corridor. Rahman swore under his breath. "They're trying to escape through the maintenance route," he said. The officer spoke into his radio again, voice urgent. "Suspects may be exiting via service tunnels. Seal off—" A burst of static cut him off. Then the lights flickered. Not a blink this time, a sustained stutter. Warm lights pulsing, dimming, pulsing again. The corridor became a strobe of uncertainty. Mara's voice cut through, sharp. "They're destabilizing the power feed," she shouted over the hum. "They're trying to force us out." Rahman shoved open a heavy door that led to the staff stairwell. "Up," he ordered. They climbed, half running, Sophia stumbling, Ella's heart hammering. The stairwell was darker, the air cooler. Behind them, the warm corridor lights flickered as if dying. At the top, they burst back into the public station, where fluorescent light and ordinary noise felt obscene after the secret world below. Rahman turned, face hard. "Lock it," he barked to the officer. The gate buzzed shut. Mara leaned against the wall, breathing hard, eyes blazing. "We have enough now," she said. Rahman nodded, grim. "Yes," he said, "enough to make this impossible to bury." Ella looked at Sophia, who stood shaking, suitcase clutched like a lifeline. Sophia's eyes were wide with the kind of fear you carried for years. Ella felt her own fear sharpen into resolve. Platform 10 had been built to exploit trust, to use the underground's authority as a leash. Now, with Sophia's testimony, the discarded cards, the private equipment, and the missing CCTV minute, the operation had a crack. And cracks, Ella knew, were where light got in. In the weeks that followed, King's Cross looked the same to everyone who didn't know where to look.
The station kept swallowing commuters, the departure boards kept clicking, the announcer voice kept telling people to mind the gap with cheerful indifference. But beneath that surface, things shifted. British Transport Police sealed the staff corridor behind the grey door under the banner of safety inspection. Contractors were pulled, access cards were audited, the missing minute in the CCTV feed became a very loud problem once it was attached to a civilian who could testify under oath. Sophia Lind was the human proof the operation hadn't counted on, someone with no reason to lie, a traveller who had been guided by official cues into a place that wasn't supposed to exist. She gave her statement in careful, shaken English. She described the sign, the announcement, the warm corridor, the strange platform, the empty train, the voice that told her to proceed. She also described the man who had tried to force her onto the train. She didn't know his name, but Mara did, Rahman did. The photo of Leo Sharp became more than a blurred commuter snapshot. It became a suspect. Leo Sharp disappeared the day after the raid. His flat in South London was empty when police arrived. His work phone was smashed and left in a sink. His laptop was gone. He had withdrawn cash in small amounts over several days, enough to run, not enough to scream flight. The operation hadn't been one man, Rahman told Ella, but Sharp had been the visible hand. He had access to communications. He had access to portable validation tools. He had a voice trained to sound official. He had believed the station would always cover him because the station covered everyone. Mara's analysis of the announcement voice proved, in court-friendly terms, that it was not an official TfL recording. It was an imitation. The imitation, in turn, linked to Sharp's own training videos and internal work recordings, tiny habits of speech, patterns of breath, the subtle fingerprint of a person who could not fully erase himself. Still, Sharp stayed gone. There were rumours, a sighting at Dover, a blurry photo near Calais, a name appearing on a contractor list in Rotterdam, then vanishing, the kind of whispers that London bred when it wanted to make peace with what it couldn't catch. For Ella, the outcome was less about seeing Sharp in handcuffs and more about the door itself. She went back to King's Cross one evening in early spring when the light lingered longer and the station smelled of wet stone after rain. She walked to the corridor where the grey door had been. The door was still there, but now it was sealed with a heavy metal plate bolted across the frame like a scar. Beside it, the staff-only plaque had been replaced with a new sign, official and stern. Restricted access, security upgrade in progress. Ella stared at it for a long time, listening to the station hum around her. Mara stood beside her, hands in her coat pockets. "It's gone," Mara said softly. Ella didn't answer immediately. She could still feel platform 10 in her bones, the warmth of the corridor, the 2 clean posters, the blank advertising panels inside the train, the way the voice had spoken from the walls. "It shouldn't have been possible," Ella said at last. Mara's gaze was tired. "Nothing is impossible," she said, "not when people can borrow authority." Ella swallowed. "It was never a platform," she murmured. "No," Mara agreed. "It was a funnel." Rahman joined them, arriving with the heavy gait of a man who'd spent months fighting a machine larger than himself. He looked older than when Ella had first met him, but his eyes were steadier. "They found traces of similar setups," he said quietly. "Not full platforms, not as elaborate, but smaller. Doors that open when they shouldn't, announcements that shouldn't exist, portable validators used in ways they weren't designed for." Ella's stomach tightened. "So platform 10 wasn't the only one." Rahman nodded. "It was the boldest," he said, "and that's why it broke." Mara's mouth curved in a humorless smile. Bold operations always assume no one will look. They rely on fatigue, on crowds, on the city teaching people to obey. Ella thought of the first night, the sign appearing so cleanly, the door ajar like permission. How easily she had followed, how easily she had believed.
"What happens now?" Ella asked. Rahman exhaled. "Now we tighten systems," he said. "We audit contractors. We separate validation logs. We treat technical faults like potential crimes." He looked at Ella, gaze steady. "And we tell people the truth. You weren't imagining it." Ella felt a strange ache behind her eyes. She hadn't realized how badly she needed to hear those words. Mara touched Ella's shoulder lightly. "You did the one thing they didn't plan for," she said. "You remembered, and you refused to accept the record as reality." Ella looked back at the sealed door, at the bolts, at the official sign. It looked like closure. It looked like safety. But London was a city of doors, and this one was only one among thousands. As she walked away, blending back into the station's flow, Ella listened to the announcements overhead, the real ones, the familiar ones. She watched commuters follow arrows without thinking. She watched tourists stare at maps as if the city could be understood on paper. She wanted to stop them all and say, "Pay attention. The signs are not always what they seem. The voice that sounds official may belong to someone who isn't. The platform you step onto may be built for a purpose you don't understand." But London didn't move on warnings. It moved on routine. So Ella kept walking, carrying the story like a small, hard stone in her pocket. A reminder, a proof, a record that couldn't be erased. And somewhere beneath the city, deep in tunnels no map showed, the rails still hummed with the possibility of doors opening. Just not that one. Not anymore.